All right. Good afternoon, colleagues, and welcome to the launch of the third edition of the Perspective Online journal. My name is Pedro Munene, and I'm the editor of the journal. I'm also lecturer in the Department of Sociology and Anthropology at the Nelson Mandela University. We are just going to keep our program very short today, hopefully for an hour to 30 minutes, having this conversation on this very interesting topic of our times, which is on COVID-19 in higher education. Now, for those who are not aware, the Perspective Online journal was launched back in 2019. Well, the idea came in 2018, and then the journal was launched in 2019. And the observation we're making at the time was that in the whole struggle for free education, students seemed to be tabling very superior arguments around how higher education should be decolonized, Africanized, transformed, and also decommodified. But those views at the time, they were largely oral presentations that were either said on the streets, in the movement, or in the interviews they would have with the media, or in the clashes they would have with the police or the executive of the state or the university. So we thought at the time as student activists that it is important rather to ensure that the arguments that we're putting on the table as student activists do not only end up on the oral landscape, but we also find a way to write down our arguments on paper so that they are able to outlive all of us for many generations to come. I mean, for an example, if Steve Biko did not take a decision to write down some of his ideas at the time, then we wouldn't be having a book today called I Write What I Like. And also Sobukwe, if he didn't take time to write down the ideas he had at the time, we wouldn't be having all the writings by him or about him throughout his participation in the struggle, taking into cognizance of the fact that now there isn't a single record of Robert Sobukwe's voice or any interview where he's speaking verbally with his voice that is available anywhere on the land. So the whole labor of writing down ideas, thoughts, arguments, and proposals of the student movement is what shaped the whole project to come up with the Perspective Online journal for students at Nelson Mandela University and also beyond our university. So this journal consists of student activists, and we also invite members of the community to contribute to how the entire trajectory of higher education in our society is supposed to move ahead. And this activism is very important in my view, because I do not think that ideas about ourselves and our reality only belong in the classroom, but rather it is the platforms that are created on the margins, the underground classrooms, the activist classrooms. They are the ones for me that provide critical consciousness for young people to truly craft their own independent program for their own liberation and for the liberation of the society broadly. So for those of you who are joining us today, welcome to this classroom on the margins of the university, where we try to make sense of how the higher education as an organ ought to move forward on our terms as students and young people, and everyone who is part of the Black consciousness activist working class movement for free education in our times. So today, we are issuing the COVID-19 in Higher Education Special Edition, and we had wonderful articles contributed by various student activists and committee activists, and even some workers in the university have written for this edition, reflecting on how the COVID-19 pandemic has affected the sector themselves and what we envision the kind of future we are going towards. That edition is available online in a soft copy for free. So if you do not have access yet to the copy, you can go online and have access to it for free. The link is going to be pasted on the chat box in the next few minutes if it is not there already. All the articles by all the authors are available. They're very interesting articles, groundbreaking ideas and arguments of our times. If you are interested really in the conditions of our people and how they make sense of the COVID-19 pandemic outside the presence of disciplines, make sure you get hold of this copy and read it at your own time. It is a very interesting edition indeed. So from those authors who contributed, we have selected 3 of them to come and present their ideas, basically what they shared on those articles, and also their thoughts generally about the COVID-19 pandemic and the kind of society we're going to have now as we move ahead into our future. But they will come in later on and I'll introduce them when it is their time to speak. Let me just go through the program for today, and then I will call up our first speaker to drive the program. Our program is very short, comrades. We have Professor Cheryl Foscroft, who is our Deputy Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching in Mandela University. Professor Foscroft will be giving us the opening remarks and framing today's discussion, and also touching on the journey we have traveled so far with this journal. The DVC has been our most reliable partner in this project over the years. After that, we'll move to the discussion with our 3 speakers. And then after that, they will have a question and answer session. So you're welcome to write down your questions on the chat box. You'll also be given the opportunity to come in and ask your questions over the mic. And then afterwards, we will have closing remarks from Dr. Bernard Sebake, who I will also introduce later on. And then afterwards, we will close off the session. Just a few house rules quickly. Firstly, make sure that your microphone is muted at all times as soon as you come in, and also, if you can, possibly try to also switch off your camera so that everyone has enough bandwidth to last for the whole session. However, if you want to keep your camera on, you're more than welcome to do so. Also, when you are speaking, it is also optional that you do switch on your camera. If you do not prefer not to, it's also up to you. Just unmute and then speak, and everybody else in the room is being asked to ensure that their mic is muted. And then also, maybe the last thing I should mention, all right, no, this one is for later on for the speakers when they come through. Let me also take time to maybe acknowledge some of our guests that we have in the room We have Professor Cheryl Foscroft, as I've indicated, the Deputy Vice Chancellor for Learning and Teaching in our university. I also see that we have the Dean of Students with us, Mr. Lutando Jack. Welcome, sir. And I also see that all the authors of the articles in the journal are also with us in the room. We also have an apology from the chair of the Critical Studies for Higher Education Transformation, Professor Andre Kitt, who's also the Deputy Vice Chancellor now for Engagement and Transformation. He would have loved to be here with us, but he has other commitments, unfortunately. All right, colleagues, with that said, let me move with the program immediately by calling up Professor Cheryl Foscroft to give us the opening remarks. Thanks.
Thank you very much for this introduction of yours as well, Pedro. And it is so fantastic to be with all of you this afternoon. Indeed, I remember 2019 very well when we launched the very first Perspectives online journal. And that was pre-COVID times. So I think we were still in the Senate or the Council chambers on South Campus, for example. And here we are 2 years later, launching the 3rd edition and doing it in a very different world and in a different way. So I guess change comes in all things. But Pedro, as the editor-in-chief of the Perspectives Online Journal and your editorial team and production team, I want to thank you very much for continuing to produce the journal. And for the authors that are in the room, I'm absolutely astounded at the high scholarly standard that has been achieved in the articles that have been produced. So I was lucky, I was given an advanced copy of the journal and I have read it. I must say I read some things in more detail, particularly the learning and teaching ones. But I'm absolutely blown away by the way that you have formulated your arguments, the critical angles that you've taken, and also the very constructive, not only arguments, but suggestions that you put forward to be able to jiggle our minds. I certainly had some unsettling moments in what was read, which is great because that makes me think and pushes me to think differently about things, for example. But also took some good things out of it that I'm going to be promoting amongst other academics, for example. So certainly I will be asking other academics to read this journal and see what they also get out of it. Now I was thinking that particularly for the authors in the room that have done such a magnificent job, I don't know about you, but whenever I have to write something, I always have this moment of almost panic at the beginning of the process where I think, sure, I'm going to now write something that's going to go out there. What are people going to think? But more importantly, will I maybe even be leading them astray by what I'm writing? Or what will the impact actually be? So I came across this quote that Mandela used in his inaugural address when he was inducted as president of the country. It's actually a quote from Marianne Williamson. Sorry, Williamson, not Williamson, Williamson. And it goes like this: our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine as children do. It's not just in some of us, it is in everyone. And as we let our light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. So I thought this was a really powerful quote in terms of the fact that our authors today, and all of the authors sitting in the room today, who publish in various spaces, have conquered the fear and have put themselves out there. They've not been afraid to put themselves out in the light. They've not shrunk away from that. And because you've been able to do that, you actually inspire others to do the same. So you liberate others from the fear of putting themselves out there and of continuing to build on the knowledges that are being produced and to stretch our thinking and our imaginations. So I just want to thank everybody that's contributed and that will contribute going forward to this journal. I just want to thank you all for that and just remind all of us that our writings can be powerful and can touch others and can inspire others. So well done to the authors of this particular journal. Thank you, Pedro.
Partner in this project. Thank you so much, Prof. Colleagues, let's now move to the panel for today's discussion. We have 3 speakers that are lined up for our conversation. First, we have Anne Munene. Anne Munene is a research assistant in the Chair for Critical Studies in Higher Education Transformation and a PhD candidate at the School for Education, Research and Engagement at the same university. Anne's research interests include living histories in post-conflict societies, pedagogy, Southern feminist theories, and new media in sharply contested politics. The second speaker, I'm introducing them in the order that they are going to speak. The second speaker will be Vuyolwethu Ngcofe. Vuyolwethu Ngcofe is a gender-based violence case coordinator at our university, a queer activist and founder of a web series called Remember My Voice, a queer memory box. And then the last speaker is Zvikomborero Hweju, who is a lecturer in the Department of Mechatronics and Engineering at Chikoi University of Technology in Zimbabwe, and is also a PhD Mechatronics Engineering candidate at Nelson Mandela University. Those are the 3 speakers we have on the panel today. Just maybe to underscore one thing, the journal is not exclusively opened to only those who come from the social sciences discipline. The journal cuts across all our faculties, all studies and all professions, because where we are seated, we do not think that there's a Chinese wall between disciplines. We do not think that science is separate from law, or law is separate from education, or education is separate from mathematics. All these things, our relationship with nature and ourselves, there's no Chinese wall that separates our knowledge ecosystem. So the nature of the journal is to rather unite the entire scholarly community to have a conversation with each other about the conditions of our people. So those 3 speakers are coming from all these different disciplines, but they've all contributed under one umbrella of framing the COVID-19 pandemic in the higher education sector. I won't waste any time, but to call upon the first speaker, Anne, to give us the input for 10 minutes, and then the speakers will follow each other. This is my last time appearing on screen until all the 3 speakers are done speaking. Afterwards, I will come in for the Q&A session. So the program will run for itself like how we do in a wedding. And over to you, comrade.
Thank you, Pedro. Dear colleagues and friends, greetings. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be part of this launching. I have a few minutes to share with you co-authored work that appears in the journal that we launched today, titled Invisibility of Race Online, Reflections on the Erasure of Race in International Networks During COVID-19. This work has been co-authored by Nobubele Puta, Anela Mnagadi, Kama Noveve, who are with us virtually, and myself, Munene. We are postgraduate students and affiliated to the Chair for Critical Studies in Higher Education Transformation at Nelson Mandela. The article that we've written examines the online digital shift that we find ourselves in for the purpose, of course, of learning, academic pursuits, business, social life, and collaborations. The article interrogates the use of virtual and digital technologies and the reproduction of exclusions. The article's central argument is that the architecture and experience of some online academic platforms facilitates the erasure of certain voices and attenuates a clumsiness of gender and racial tensions. This central argument is based on a recent experience where the authors were virtually hosted in a global network. During this session, the Internet of Things was not on our side for the 4 of us, and therefore Zoom kept on kicking us out because we are part of the new phenomenon that has been conceptualized and that we already know of, the low bandwidth communities. To save the situation, of course, we had to put our videos off. The hosts then sent us individual messages on Zoom asking that we turn our videos on. Colleagues and friends, you do understand how Zoom or the Teams gallery inherently works. It easily gives us an optic that profiles who's Black, who's Caucasian, who's interracial or biracial, and who's white. Possibly at times, if you look at that gallery, you can almost possibly note what age group is there. And of course, if we were to remove our pictures or actual videos, the gallery will still profile people in terms of what institution, affiliation, or possible ethnicity. And I don't think I'll be shy. I think I'd also mention religious affiliation. The experience of invisibility, of course, illustrates or exposes what we have as digital gaps and inequalities that we individually face, and of course, higher education also faces. Other common problems that we all know connected to digital work is that we have problems of connectivity, reliability, security, and visibility. In essence, I think the issue of being in COVID-19, we can't escape the major question of who deserves the internet. And I think if we was to still look at our present lives, we are also faced with the question of who deserves the vaccine. Knowing that I'm short of time, I would encourage us to read the article. And in this place, you will understand that we came to some crucial truths that I will share. One, that the internet is white, and whiteness is the default identity of representation and humanity. Two, that there is need to disrupt what Foucault describes as normal occupants. Three, that there is a call to be self-critical that invites moderation and embracing of other possibilities. Four, that we need to be at a place where we can implement what is conceptualized as symbolic effort. which is the inclusion of the minority, differently abled, to avoid responsibility of discrimination. I would want to end my contribution here, but I thank you. My co-authors will be glad to receive your questions, comments, and other contributions that I have left out in the interest of time. Many thanks.
Thank you so much, Anne. And good afternoon, everyone. Well, my paper is titled Being a Support Person in the Time of Gender-Based Violence and COVID-19. The paper is about the challenges that have been brought down by the restriction of movement during the first week of hard lockdown and the concerns this brings for the safety of women in particular in the university space. In this investigation, I have discussed 3 themes, which are safety and freedom. And I also analyzed the changes brought by COVID-19 to the nature of the work that support staff in the GBV area do. And the last theme is on the lives of the LGBTI community. So the initial level 5 lockdown, if you remember, the regulations, they meant that the physical access to visiting friends and the support groups normally available in the university space was no longer available. And during the 2020 lockdown, when students were sent home, we noticed there was an increase recorded in the number of student reporting cases involving third-party offenders. But what do we mean when we talk about third-party? Third-party offenders are offenders who are not affiliated with the university in any way. Also, talking about an increase, excuse me there was also, in the third-party offenders increase, there was also recorded alongside an expected decrease of student-on-student cases. Well, this is because of the frequent social activities that students partake in that were no longer available. Remember, we had no sport activities or any activities at the time. Also, increasingly, support staff have found their role being that of intervening in the cases that have occurred within the homes and within the communities of students. We know, colleagues, that how violence has become rather a norm in many South African communities and homes, and how gender-based violence in many homes is not always understood as a valid form of violence in the communities that we belong to. And incidents, they are underreported, and perpetrators, they often go unpunished. So home is not often a safe space for many of us. But what about the university? The university space itself is not without its own threats to safety. We have seen the way gender-based violence has been perpetuated in and around our campuses, especially here in Nelson Mandela University. But what is the difference? Now, here's the difference. The primary difference is our ability to provide support should a GBV incident occur, and also to proactively conduct the anti-GBV awareness campaigns aimed at enhancing the understanding of what constitutes GBV, and also to change the mindset of the university community. The examples of such interventions that you find in the university space, most of you may know the Memeza anti-GBV campaign, which is aimed to combat violence in the university space through the discussions that we have. And another example is the Singamadoda campaign, which seeks to promote positive masculinity. These initiatives that I've just mentioned have since moved onto the virtual platform to continue. But as the support persons, what are the changes that have been brought by COVID-19 to the nature of work that we do? As GBV support persons, we had to adapt to a new virtual way of conducting our engagement and support and advocacy work, moving online to Zoom, to Microsoft Teams, to emails, to doing discussions on Facebook and consultations via phone calls. And during a consultation with one of my colleagues, who noted with frustration how GBV support staff have always functioned with with an assumption that face-to-face interaction will always be possible. But as such, the role of the support person has become more complex with the drastic changes to their work living, to their work life rather, rising and also experiencing stress and anxiety. So we could say our work has become more intrusive. Resoundingly, our colleagues agree that it has been difficult to offer support during the COVID-19 lockdown. Most times the connectivity issues also during the sessions is unstable when the video camera is activated during these sessions, and without being able to see the client, it is difficult for support persons to read the body language, the nonverbal cues of their client. This makes it hard for the support person to have confidence in the quality of the work and the interventions that we're trying to do. Also, we found that some students, they find themselves fully comfortable expressing themselves via these online platforms, while others, they find it very difficult to actually express themselves via these online platforms. Also, the occupational health employees, colleagues, you will also note that their work has been also affected because they work with employees and their clients as well that are working from home. They've also identified several hurdles to the online counseling process, such as not being adequately not form a connection with the client, and the increased risk of interruption of clients by third parties. And we have to note that we have observed an increase in the number of male students requesting support during COVID-19 lockdown relative to pre-COVID-19 times. And what about the LGBTI lives, as I want to conclude? During the COVID-19 lockdown period, let's talk about the RES system. The RES system has become a cocoon for those LGBTI plus students who remained behind and were unable to go elsewhere to avoid the homophobia from their residence mates. This shows clearly that the university space itself is not immune to homophobic attacks. Remember that students who normally spend their day going to lectures and campus events no longer benefited from these differential spaces that were available to them. But despite the ongoing awareness programs having moved to virtual platforms, the effectiveness of these online interventions, it was very much difficult to gauge. And also you would remember that many LGBTI persons experience emotional isolation, rejection, and eviction from their homes, those who were able to go home. And the issue of connectivity, it also was highlighted there. So in conclusion, while this paper has noted various challenges of the use of the virtual platforms for advocacy work, for support as well, including the absence of guarantee of privacy in the homes of the clients and the connectivity issues, the virtual landscape has also provided many opportunities, including the increased presence of males in the gender-based violence discussions. And resoundingly, colleagues, consultations with their support staff show that their greatest fear, or our greatest fear, is the inability to fully support our clients in ways that face-to-face interaction allow. And to cope with these challenges, it is necessary for support given to staff to take a more proactive approach towards supporting GBV support staff through these changing times. And as I conclude, to close off my presentation, allow me to borrow Prof. Zetuma Tabeni's words when speaking about aesthetic resilience with queer arts, that queer people have been murdered, especially in their communities. So as a society, there's a lot to learn from the meeting of queerness and violence, especially in the university space, excuse me. And part of our work, colleagues, as people who occupy the space in the university, is to undo the strong link between violence and the university. And I'd like to emphasize on that. Part of our work as people who occupy the university space is to undo the strong link between violence and the university. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's quite a pleasure to present at such an event that talks about the issues that have been brought about by the scourge of COVID-19. What I'm going to talk about is from the engineering perspective, where I will pose it as a question: what's the role of engineers in mitigating the spread of the COVID-19 scourge? As has been evidenced during the past months, there are a lot of things and changes that have been brought about by the COVID-19 scourge. And among the casualties is the higher education institution. So some of the institutions now are being opened, or some are preparing to open, and the students have started coming back on campus. There is need for clear game plans that will make sure that the spread is kept minimal or is stopped completely. So in this presentation, I'll be looking at the ways through which the COVID-19 scourge can be spread. And according to researches that have been carried out, it has been noted that COVID-19 is mostly spread through human contact with contaminated surfaces. So I was trying to identify some of these surfaces and try to bring into play sensor technology to stop the spread of these diseases. According to studies, at institutions like universities, there are places like water taps. Since water is a valuable resource that is required by everyone, it is not surprising that a lot of people, they visit such sources, and they are amongst some of the most touched surfaces on campus. So what can be done so that we can prevent such contact with these contaminated surfaces? There has been introductions of what are known as auto taps. Why are we talking of auto taps? There are some institutions in South Africa and beyond that already have this technology in use. But even though they've adopted this, there's still a lot that needs to be done. The percentages are still low, and some of the reasons may be due to lack of finance, probably, to adopt this to full level. And also, some of the things that have been identified include bank cards, even the exchange of cash. It's much on campuses. And the probability of contamination is very high as well. So what can be done about that? There is a technology that uses remote identification of human beings, and human beings, facial recognition. There are certain aspects that are very unique, that are like fingerprints between individuals. And these can be used instead of people exchanging cash. Probably on campus, all the students, they are preloaded in a database, and their faces are also stored in that database. And when one wants to purchase, it's very possible that a camera can just identify the face, then it checks if it matches one that is already in the database, and then a transaction is made directly from the bank account without the use of cards or even cash. Why are we talking about that? Yes, some developed nations are already using that technology, but on this side of our continent of Africa, there's still a lot that needs to be done in order to stop the spread of this scourge. According to some researches that have been carried out as well, buildings, they can play a very major role in minimizing the spread, or conversely, in aiding the spread of COVID-19 or diseases in general. On buildings, we have such things like doorways where students have to touch when they are gaining access to the structure or when they are leaving. So it's also possible to use sensors whereby there's no need for students to get in contact with those doors. What the sensor does is it identifies a human as he is approaching the door, then it automatically opens, then after passage, then it closes. So such technology, I think it can play a major role in minimizing the spread of COVID. Also in buildings and facilities in general, we also have ancillaries like switches. Light is very important in buildings and it's expected that it's most frequented. So there are sensors that can be used whereby one can use voice or can use signs or even proximate, and the lights will be switched on and there will not be any need to go and touch, leading to the spread of COVID-19. From the studies that I've carried out, I've discovered that some of the buildings that are found in these higher education institutions, they fall short of the requirements that are required or the expectations to stop or even reduce the spread of COVID-19. So, as we are drawing to the conclusion, there is need even for bylaws to be put in place that check whether buildings are conforming to these regulations. And also, there are issues that have caused some of these technologies not to be embraced. For example, the use of face recognition. There are instances whereby data that has been extracted from individuals ended up being used for uses that they had not initially been intended for. So there is the issue of privacy. So also I think regulations must be put in place so that people, they trust such systems, and after they trust the systems, then they can be put in place and we see ourselves moving forward and the spread of COVID-19 is kept minimal. So, like I have said, the fight against COVID-19, it's a collective effort and it requires input from all angles, engineers, and even the social science side. Everyone must be brought into place. In conclusion, this application of sensors, it's feasible and it has been tried elsewhere, but what is only required is to enroll it on a large scale. And after that has been done, then the results are expected to come. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much, colleagues, for those contributions. For those who don't have access to the soft copy yet, I've pasted the link right on the chat box. The three articles, if I can refer colleagues straight to where they are, the first one that Anne spoke on, she co-authored that article with three other colleagues that I believe are in the room: Nobubele Puza, Anele Mgadi, Kamano Veve, and then the speaker, which was Anne. That article is on page 4 under part 1. Part 1 covers Black erasure, patriarchization, and white domination. You will find that article on page 4, and it is titled "The Invincibility of Race Online, Reflections on the Erasure of Race in International Networks During COVID-19. And then the second one, that was covered by Violet Ngofe, it's on page 21. It is titled "Being a Support Person in the Time of Gender-Based Violence and COVID-19. And then the final one that Zviko just touched on, it's on page 59, titled "Embracing Sensor Technology in Mitigating COVID-19 Impact in Higher Education Institutions." So do get yourself a copy. The edition is close to 71 pages in total, And there is about 9 articles in total covering various topics around the COVID-19 pandemic in higher education. All right, now we move to the Q&A session. You're more than welcome to raise your hand in the room and then I'll identify you. You unmute your mic and submit your question. You're also welcome to also type your question on the chat box. The authors that have contributed in the edition were also in the room. You are also more than welcome to pose your questions and also have a few comments to add. Just a question from me to the panel, and maybe to kickstart the conversation. Your 3 inputs, in one way or the other, they are having a conversation with one another, and touching on the internet that belongs to whiteness, which absolutely has no space whatsoever for anyone that comes from outside the civilization of Euro-American imagery of white people. And then Zviko on the utilization of science and technology to try and mitigate or minimize the spread of the virus. The very same technology that Anne has a problem with when it is being applied in Africa. And then Vuyo on the gendered patterns of oppression that the lockdown regulations had an impact on, especially on queer bodies. My question is, as you can see already, the professors of these universities are already publishing lots of stuff about COVID-19 already. They are writing about us, they are writing about our conditions, they are writing about our traumas, everything that we're going through, they're already writing about it. They are publishing it. So from the transformation questions we had around the 2000 in higher education, many publications came out of that. After 2008, we had a whole movement on pedagogy of that, pedagogy of this. Many publications came through. After that, we had a big debate on decolonization. Many publications came out of the decolonization movement. Decolonize that, decolonize this and that. And now we have COVID-19. Again, many publications are coming out on COVID-19. So it's like we have all these industries, right? We have the decolonization industry, the COVID-19 industry, the transformation industry, the pedagogy industry. All these industries, and people are getting promotions, they are publishing, lots of research funds and exchanges are being made between the global north and the global south. People are becoming professors and so on from all these publications about our conditions. My question is, what needs to be done now? What now for this organ called the university? It has been critiqued from all angles. You've also done that sharply in this edition. What now for the higher education landscape? Why do we keep having faith in the university? Should we continue having faith in the university? Is there anything university now that it can provide? Because COVID-19 has demonstrated the vast inequalities that exist in this university, the vast dehumanizations and layers of dehumanization that are experienced in this university. Why do we keep trusting the university? Can it be trusted? Is it a useful organ? This question goes to everyone on the panel. You can respond to the question anyhow, and then anybody else from the floor can also come through and join the conversation. Over to you, colleagues on the panel. Anyone can go first.
I'll attempt not giving a response. I think it will be more of what I feel in terms of when you ask, why do we keep having faith in the university? And of course, being at Nelson Mandela University, you will realize more often than not, the talk is that the university is for the public good. Therefore, as students, as scholars, anybody within the university domain, ours is to create work, service that is beneficial for the community. This is not to say that the university has not let us down, we who are in the university, or has not let down the community that we serve. But if I, as a young scholar, would detach myself from the university, I think this is what the Nigerians would call abomination. Tofiekwa. It should not happen. I must be in the university space because I do realize as a Black person, again, this is not a space that is welcoming for me. Vuyo would say it much more better. And therefore, our presence in the university, but the fact that we are students or whatever it is that we do at the university, I think at times our presence is meant to echo some kind of disruption. Maybe in 2015, 2016, and even now in 2021, we tried with fees must fall, but we all know where all this leads to. I mean, at the end of it all, we were told we are entertaining the public by being an yearly soap opera. So, Pedro, this was a very tough question. I don't have the answer to it, but I think I am at the university to represent people like me who never had the opportunity to be in the university for years, and hoping that I can raise the bar and bring along more of people who look like me in this space. Thank you.
Let me also attempt to answer you, Pedro, there. I think what is important is to note that we need to have faith in the university as the starting point of all the development through the creation of knowledge. And that faith that says we believe that the university, and I think I made a point of the difference between home and the university, that the university is a mediated space. So to have these policies and implement them, the policies that decolonize the heteronormative norms that exist already, even in the university space. So yeah, that is my small contribution to your question. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much, Pedro, for the question. Universities, they have a great role to play. Like has been said before, this fight against COVID is not a one-day thing. So I think we need to give everyone the benefit of the doubt to try and contribute all that they can. And maybe one day we will win. So I think we are in the right direction as universities because we are playing our part as well. And since we are not the only people who are fighting against COVID, but as universities, we should be seen doing something. And most of the inventions that have come, they've come through the university. So it is our expectation and our hope that even this time around, it will come through the university system as well. That's my contribution.
All right, lovely. Jenny, I can't see the chat box on my side. Do you perhaps have questions and comments on the chat box to the panel?
Hi, Pedro. Yes, so there's two. I had a question in the comment section for Vuyo. So I asked about, she mentioned that men have become more active in discussions around GBV during COVID-19. So I was just wondering what aspects of the pandemic or lockdown might have led to that. I'm not sure if that's covered in the article. I haven't read it yet. And then the second thing, yeah, Vuyo. And then the second thing that's in the chat, I don't know if it says here SOMPC. I don't know if that's, I don't know if that's an abbreviation of a name or a name. I don't know if they would like to raise their question themselves, or if they'd like me to read it out.
Sombisi, are you in the room? Do you want the question to be read, or you want to make the input yourself?
Well, am I allowed?
Yes, we can hear you loud and clear.
Okay, can I go?
You.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thanks for those presentations. Very heavy presentations. I'm still digesting them. And then the point that I want to make is it's more of it's a pervasive point, right? And it was sparked by the first two presentations. The point is, it seems to me that pre the advent of COVID-19, right? The world was vehemently unequal, along the lines of race, gender, class, geography, etc. You had violent inequality long before COVID. So it seems what COVID has done, at least for me, is that it has accentuated, the different features of inequality that I've mentioned, and perhaps even exposed more, things like medical racism, right? Or scientific racism, if you like. So it seems to me then, if you look at where the impact has been felt more, it has been in Africa and Latin America. So the question for me is, for all three presenters, in looking at the far-reaching impact of COVID insofar as it has reconfigured our world, don't you think the bigger question that people who see themselves as African scholars should be addressing is, what should be the nature of African scholarship in the world as reconfigured by COVID? For me, I think that is the deeper question that we should be grappling with. And I'm arguing because I don't think African scholars can proceed along the same neoliberalist episteme that preceded the advent of COVID. We need to, in my view, radically rethink the meaning of African scholarship in the way that COVID has reconfigured the world. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Sompisi. Yeah, so we have two questions on the table to the panel. You can come in, colleagues, in whatever order. Maybe let's start with you.
Yes, let me start and answer Jenny there, and then I think what was I think the difference was the opportunity for anonymity, to remain anonymous in these platforms. Remember, for the face-to-face interactions, when you enter South Campus Auditorium, most people will recognize, oh, that's for you. But here, you can enter a GPV discussion and you can remain Samsung V9. And no one will know that this is for you. You will keep quiet and you will enjoy these discussions, And also, we don't have time. I don't know. It gave people the platform to just come and, without being known that you are here, because there are 59 other participants in the session. So I think that's why we had an increased number of male participants in the GPV discussions.
Sompisi, when you talk about, when you ask the question, what is reconfigured African scholarship? I think this is what I got from what you were trying to explain. I wouldn't say African scholarship has not tried to write itself differently before COVID-19. And I think when Pedro says we've been having ourselves in industries of either pedagogy, transformation, like it seems our lives have been changed into commodity. When you talk about reconfigured African scholarship, it does exist. And I'm talking from the point of knowing I as an individual, and I work with women in post-conflict societies who try and write how we should read post-conflict narratives, far away from the narratives of the Nordic authors who kind of tell us how we should read peace, conflict, and security issues. I think with COVID-19, it was not only about writing that we saw prominent. I think there's a lot of singing from very young aged children trying to understand why COVID, why in Africa, the resisting of that we will die, the total refusal that we can't be the continent that dies out of hunger and malnutrition. And then now you're telling us we will die because we don't have a vaccine, or we have some virus that we cannot totally explain. So I want to possibly echo that there is a different way of Africans writing our lived experience. It might not be there, like very, very visible. You might have to look for it, but it actually does exist. Possibilities at the periphery, and we need to move this work from the periphery to the center. But of course, it becomes very difficult when we have global knowledge being the main work and at the very center. Thank you.
Okay.
Rico?
Yes, thank you. I think the advent of the COVID-19 scourge has revealed, or it has made us conscious of the fact that we as Africans, there are times like we lag behind, or let me say, it's high time that we as the continent of Africa, we work collectively, and instead of playing second role to the Western counterparts, we need to be in the forefront, and we need to move away from that aspect whereby we are only involved in things theoretically, and when it comes to the aspect of taking practical action, then we are nowhere to be seen. So I think we need to reconfigure our priorities, whereby when something comes unexpectedly, then we'll always be ready for it, not to be always on the receiving end. So as African scholars, I think we have a challenge. We need to be in the forefront. We need to get in research, and those researches must yield positive results, and then we can move forward. And also from the political side as well. So like what I said, it's a collective effort, not only for the academics or for everyone else leaving out the politicians. I think we need to have the same priorities, and then we work with a common goal. Then we'll be able to fight, and we have a good cause and we'll win. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, colleagues. I think let's hold it right there. Thank you so much to our three speakers on the panel for the wonderful contribution, and also for the conversation that we've had. Once again, I encourage everyone to get hold of the copy of the journal. The articles there are many, and some of the questions that have been tabled here get to be responded to comprehensively in written form on the articles that they have been written by our activists. I have no doubt that the articles featured here are all based on a social justice orientation that will contribute to the transformation, the decolonization, and the Africanization of higher education in our society beyond the COVID-19 pandemic. So make sure that you do get yourself a copy of the journal, and also distribute it widely to other colleagues. The work of the journal continues. The next edition is going to come out before the end of the first semester, which is around June. Another writing opportunity is going to be available for any activist that wants to contribute. It will have its own theme, and also an editorial team that will be put together, and the invite will be distributed across our networks for anyone with a writing potential. And even those who do artwork, you are also welcome to contribute to the journal, because as you know, arguments and ideas are not only framed through written words, but also artwork and music is also part of the whole ecosystem of the anti-colonial struggle. All right, let's move on, colleagues, with the program. We're now drawing towards the end, and I'm happy that we're right on time. Let me invite the Director of Student Governance and Development, one of our partners in this project, Dr. Bernard Sebake, to give us closing remarks and also the way forward on our project. Bernard, over to you, leadership.
Well, thanks, Petro, for the opportunity you are affording me. I always remain the last in most cases. You rightfully put it, because my role is just really to support this important project that we have started collectively to conceptualize and how it is then moving forward. But interestingly, this morning when I woke up, because I knew that there would be an opportunity of this nature, I prepared almost 5 pages of my notes. But maybe I made a mistake, my editor, to speak to you during the course of the day. From your introduction, opening remarks, you almost swallowed about 4 pages of the 5. Because as we were talking, I kept on canceling. I realized that now my script is actually script naked. I'm only left with 1 page. But I'll make sure that in future I don't talk to you, so that I remain original at the time that you are affording me as my editor to really play my role in any of the launch of our scholarship work. But nonetheless, it actually demonstrates that we are a bit of same feather. We always flock together in terms of ideas and otherwise. But colleagues, I am inspired by the literature of Francis Fukuyama, and I will also really drive home why this literature is actually inspiring me. If you go to a book written by Francis Fukuyama, which is titled The End of History and the Last Man, he makes a very compelling argument towards the end. And as he concludes, he actually said the end of history. And I concur with Francis Fukuyama, because the journey to scholarship remains very bumpy. It has its own power play, where high-level researchers hog the space in order to talk to themselves through journals and be the only ones who contribute to the knowledge production. Why am I saying this story? I want to introduce what perspective online is. And of course, in agreement with what we have been saying, my editor, Mr. Mzile, that the perspective online is actually a journal, which is periodically on quarterly basis as an ideal, but we are moving towards that direction. It is reflective in nature. It actually captures a variety of scholars in different, and it's multidisciplinary in essence by its own nature of existence. Of course, its purpose is to also really develop young scholars, young researchers activists, scholars who are really want to really contribute towards sharpening the existing contradictions and make sure that they really suggest, trajectory that will really put Africa on the path. And I think it's very important that the quality of work that these young scholars are producing has actually being reflected by the opening remarks of Prof. Foscroft. And she said that really the quality of work, the suggestions that come out of the manuscripts, they really begin to reflect that indeed knowledge evolves. And this is really a counter space or a counter action towards what I term orthodoxy marks the end of scholarship, which Francis Fukuyama in his book reflect that orthodoxy marks the end of history. Therefore, the disjuncture between the route or the journey to scholarship will always position perspective online as a very strategic instrument that really bridges the gap between the high-level scholars and the emerging scholars through a manuscript and journal peer-reviewed articles. So I want to congratulate all the contributors for really simply taking their time, put their ideas on a paper and begin to engage us through their reflective experience. COVID-19 came, it disrupted the many industries, it disrupted higher education, it disrupted the society and the globe naturally by virtue of how it actually spread across. But it also brings these experiences that requires really to be put into space through scholarship. Now, let me congratulate all the contributors. Well done. You've done a very brilliant work. But I think it's also very important that as you continue to write and contribute to Perspective Online, you need to ensure that you cite the work that you are doing. This is a strategic direction that the Perspective Online will be taking in order to make sure that we meet the standards. We will be talking in some years to come where Perspective Online is part of the journals that are recognized, that are accredited by the HET. This is an ideal journey where we're going, and we will not give it up until. I'm saying this because there are many universities in South Africa and Africa and so on that have their own journals that are edited within their own universities. And the Perspective Online then is that particular ecosystem. It gives Mandela University and the community at large that particular piece of expression in order to make sure that it plays that very important role. Mr. Mzileni, you actually nullified some of the points I wanted to raise by discretion. Think about one edition that directly talk about higher education activism in the context of society and transformation. The fundamental question is, we have higher education since we entered into, after the dismantling of colonialism and so on. Where we are today, what role had higher education played this far in order to sharpen this transformation that is required by Africa and its own independence? I think that's a very important issue, but I trust your discretion that this kind of an issue is very evaluative in nature. It sharpens the delivery and the expectation of higher education and the society generally, because there's always an indication that higher education universities are an ivory tower. Whatever that is happening in the university does not fit into the material conditions of ordinary people on the ground. That narrative must be disrupted in a sense that evaluative, reflective kind of reflection by maybe one of the editions that through your discretion you think about. We need to interrogate this important question. It sharpens the existence of higher education. It actually tells us Whether do we have enough activists that are really ensuring that higher education is fit for purpose and address the material conditions of African people on the ground? I think it's an important issue that I also have to highlight. Where are we going from here? We will meet with the editorial team, look at various options where we can actually attract more of the writers, both internally and externally. We will ensure that at least several workshops in terms of young researchers will work with the research office in order to ensure that the quality that Prof. Foscroft spoke about is maintained. We even accelerate more than that. This will then be the build-up activities that are leading us to the next edition of Online Perspective, as really pronounced by my editor, Mr. Munene. I made a mistake as well in my closing remarks, Chair, that I need to acknowledge the presence of Usompis. You know, he has been active online. We have been together in trenches, and his contribution to Perspective Online, it goes beyond recognition. We want to active online and keep supporting us. That who really begin to have always been supporting us. Prof. Foscroft, for your continuous support. Let me thank as well the Dean of Students for his continuous support as a partner of the Perspective Online. The authors, the editorial committee, and all staff members who really made time to be with us today. Thank you very much. Thank you and thank you. Let me give you back the mic, Program Director. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Dr. Sebake. Colleagues, this brings us to the end of our session today. I wish everyone a safe weekend. Keep safe, sanitize, wear a mask, keep a social distance. Information about the next edition will be published on our various platforms for the next set of contributors to come through. Otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. It's really appreciated. Diabulela, goodbye.